So if we leave the SHRED program for a little while, there were a myriad of other changes that have been made to the innovation and incentive plans that the federal government has. So I'm going to touch on all of them. This is not an exhaustive list. The budget, of course, is posted online, and you can go and have a look at it. So let's look at some of the other things they did. First thing, improve access to capital. This is, I think most people who are involved in the government and the academic studies of this agree this is a big problem for Canadian companies. It's actually a bigger problem for Western companies than it is for Central Alberta companies as well. So this is something important. They set aside $500 million to put into this area. We know that $100 million of that is going to go to the Business Development Bank of Canada. They have a structure already set up for venture investing. So that one is basically just going to give those guys a bigger pot of money to play with. The other thing that they're proposing is a $400 million fund that is going to be used for private early stage and venture capital investing. We don't know what the structure of that's going to be, but we know that Alberta has had similar programs for the last few years, and probably Randy's going to have a lot more to say about that. The other thing they've done is increase the direct government funding of R&D. So the big ones there, there's going to be $110 million to double the IRAP NRC grant. There's going to be a launch of a new Western Innovation Program that's got a regional mandate. There were no details in the budget about that program. I believe it's going to be administered by Western Economic Diversification, and we're just going to have to see what that one is about. In terms of increased support for R&D via government procurement, this is something that, again, I think will be welcome. There's going to be an expansion of the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program. That program is already in place, and there's going to be an additional $95 million for the 3 years starting 2013, and thereafter it's going to have permanent program status at a funding level of $40 million a year. So what they're doing there is people who have innovative products can use the government as the first customer, the launch customer for that. It's a good idea. It's an idea that I actually have exposure from my own background. If it's done right, it can actually have a high impact on the country's economic advancement through innovation. So something interesting there. We'll have to see how it plays out in reality. The other thing that they've looked at is they have definitely pivoted more towards an industrial R&D focus and away from and to a lesser extent from curiosity-based research. And they're looking at driving a lot of private-public research collaborations. That's going to affect the NRC, it's going to affect the universities. There's significant money being poured into this, $67 million to the NRC, $12 million for the Business Centers of Excellence Networks program, $105 million into the forestry innovation programs. There are other targeted industries in there. I haven't listed them all. $37 million for the post-secondary granting organizations to promote industrial and academic collaboration. So significant amounts of money. I think we're going to see significant pressure on those organizations to pivot more towards industrially related research. So what do the changes in the SHRED program mean to companies? So this is the million-dollar question. If you look at the budget, what they have said is they're pulling $500 million out of the program. That's 14% nearly. That is what their budget numbers say they are pulling out of the SHRED program. Its impact is going to be highly variable. It's going to depend on each company's mix of capital items, use of contractors, whether they are using the proxy or traditional overhead method. There's a myriad of different things are involved there. You can't just go ahead and blankly calculate the number just on the back of an envelope. It's going to depend on your particular corporate situation, and it's going to be a big impact. So what we did is, for most of our clients, we actually did a simulation. We reprocessed a tax year of theirs, their most recent tax filing, under the new rules. What is the actual effect if an accountant goes through and says, okay, this is no longer an overhead, this is no longer going to be calculated the same way, what's going to happen to the contractors, where are the capital items. So we went through and did that. Our clients received a simulation basically to say what was going to happen to them. And the results were quite interesting. So for the CCPCs whose spends are under $3 million, you're going to see about a 5 to 10% reduction. So not too harsh, but it will be affected. It will affect them. For the non-CCPCs, so the bigger companies who have larger spends, who are public or not Canadian controlled, their effect is going to be larger. It's going to be 30 to 35%. So if you are a large spender or a public company, this is going to have a significant effect on your R&D. To date, there has been no substantial change in the complexity of the program. They haven't addressed the single largest factor that drives complexity in the program, and that is the science eligibility. So this is something, it's kind of a lost opportunity, I would say. They haven't affected that. They may have actually increased the complexity that they're facing because, first of all, you're going to have to propagate capital changes up through contractors to the payer. And the second thing is we and the SRED are expecting to see an increase in number of traditionally claimed overhead costs. That means a lot more work for everybody, including the CRA. So maybe a little bit of a backstep there. The other thing to note is that probably fewer people are aware that there are changes proposed to the Alberta Provincial SHRED program as well. So the current government made the proposition that they would undo a complicated double grind feature of the legislation that was introduced in 2009. If that goes through, if the current government is re-elected, the budget that they have proposed goes through as it is currently written, that will actually add back about 1.5% to people's SHRED claims. So if that goes through, there's a little bit of good news there. It'll offset the federal changes a little bit.
Well, thanks very much for your insights into the budget as it relates to SHRED, Graham. We'll now turn to Randy for his thoughts on the venture capital space and the 2012 budget.
So the budget really is two perspectives. You're over here in the, can we get this thing commercialized, out, sold fast? The budget is same old, but if you're in the actual commercialization black box, it's a pretty good budget. And what I mean is what I'm seeing in the colleges, I'm seeing companies coming into our incubator at NATE. They already know what their prototype is that they want to build. They already knew who the customer was, and they're coming into the college system and they're saying, I need some machining, I need some potential opportunity to get a mold done with my prototype so I can show it to Suncor, and they've already told me they'll give me a check for $10 million if I can build this. And the ENIR program goes, whoa, it's not as easy as just building prototypes. You know, we're going to teach you how to build a business. And we've had already 5 companies pop out of that system that are they're in that system less than 14 months. So and one of the companies was this is my poster child, he was one person 18 months ago. Today he has 4 partners, 17 employees, and they're doing a $5 million raise to open their US offices. I tell that story because that individual, all these programs, we were moving too fast to touch. And so this budget has 0 impact on this high growth business. He needed to get out of the innovation system as quickly as possible and build a real company. But inside that black box, we joke about seed funds, and the University of Illinois said, we're doing something so early, they called it a bird seed fund. And I like that, it was really good. But their bird seed fund was a return to their investors of minus 48%, and that was over 3 funds. So the valley of death space is just not a place the private sector can play with any form of interest or value. It's actually you do it because it's the right thing to do and it's your community passion, and you have a public sector heart. But if you're actually in this to make any money and build companies, it's not the space to play. So again, this isn't a shameless plug for TSGI, but most of the people on the outside the black box are quite happy with hiring consultants to go into the black box and find the funds and massage SHRED and massage IRAP and try to figure out where the honeypots are. But if you're in that startup space and you're looking to take a longer time at development, that's a good place to be because you need the money in the black box to kind of create and innovate. A lot of that's happening inside of the current incubators. But for actual companies that are on the fast track, the budget didn't help them at all. So from a venture capital perspective, these are interesting programs, but it's going to be interesting to see how useful they are to Canadians too. Out of 100 companies, we lovingly and laughingly joke that venture capital is only for about 2 out of every 100. So how did the other 98 get funded? So if they can't play in the black box because it's too slow, and they're not getting venture capital, what did the budget do for you? So it is kind of in a sense same old, same old. Atlantic Canada is getting a tax credit for investors. That's a big issue. We're not going to get one in Alberta. You can continue to, and I'll tell you why. I used to be in politics. You can throw tomatoes later, but I did some time in that policy space. It's very difficult to pass a technology tax credit here. But what the venture capital space does, I think, is a win for Alberta. The BDC program has actually gone and hired a fellow out of Silicon Valley. His name's Robert Simon, who is actually commuting between Silicon Valley and Calgary, and he's actually running the BDC early stage office. So I think there's going to be some really good experience with some Valley connections out of that BDC money. So I'm a huge Robert Simon fan. He's one of the founders of a program out of the Valley called C100, and I think that's going to be a huge win for Alberta. On the $400 million, I have a lot of, I don't know how much time I've got. I'm probably running out, but a couple more minutes. I'm a reformed VC, which means I actually tried to raise a fund and I raised half. So just enough rope to hang myself, which is always a good way to go. So we raised 30 of 60, but I have tried to play in that space and I do understand the how to build a fund dynamic. When you look at the Alberta experience of 100 million, there's a lot, the jury's still out on whether that was a win for us or not. So, AEC had 100 million, decided that there was not enough experience inside of Alberta to feel risky or enough to basically support a local general partner who had no VC experience. So what they did instead is that because Alberta was one of the only places in North America during the financial crisis with what's called LP money, limited partner money, we had swarms of VCs coming from New York, Silicon Valley, and they'd come to the Banff Venture Forum, and we saw them there. And the whole Banff Venture Forum dynamic has changed over 24 months, where it used to be the black box, the commercialization people in Alberta getting together, and all of a sudden we had VCs crawling all over Alberta because we had money. And so now we have 6 funds have received money from Alberta Enterprise Corp, and not one of them is actually from here in Alberta. What they have done is hired an Alberta person to look at those funds. And it's, I think, 2 companies so far have been funded inside of that LP money. So I'm going to say the jury's still out. It's a risky it would have been a risky strategy to give first-time GPs money. I think it's also a risky strategy to take taxpayers' money and hand it to Silicon Valley guys and see what they'll do in Alberta. The Canadian experience is 2 years behind. So this $400 million, they're going to find the same thing, that Europeans, Americans are going to look and say, wow, the only limited partner money, the only place to build new VC money is to go to Canada. And it'll be interesting to see if a bunch of guys come from California, get $80 million of this money and say, but we'll hire a couple of Canadians, but our decisions are still made in California. So I'm of 2 minds on the VC fund. I'm not quite sure that we've got it right. I'm not quite sure it's going to benefit the greater number of companies, but I will say that my sense is the budget, and including the Western Diversification money, has said enough of just scattering money across the innovation network and hoping that out of 100 companies, we'll find 2 or 3 that make it out of this kind of planting seeds all over the ground. I think what the government's decided with the way they're spending their money is laser focus on 3 or 4 companies that show that they can win, are high growth, can go in it through the innovation system in 16 months. And those are the companies that are now getting the WD money and the venture capital money. The support's still there across the planting seeds, and the NRC's evidence of that, because there'll be more money to see who's going to come up and support it. But I still believe that all that the budget's done is supported what's already going on inside the university system, the NRC system, the SHRED system, and you still need to hire a Sherpa to go through that if you're a private company. So anyway, those are my comments.
Well, that was great, Randy. Thanks for your comments on the impact of the budget to your areas of venture capital and angel funding. We appreciate your time for all of you that attended today. There's been a lot of detail, and we're only too pleased to discuss any individual questions you might have after the session. Thank you again.